you've kind of led into the personal side of questioning that I wanted to get into next. And it's,
Yeah.
in a sense, you've kind of answered it. Conditioning leads to the lack of stress from doing work like this. Is that right?
It is. So if you go on our websites, all of the leadership from the management team to the advisory board to the board are all open. It's all open source. And all of our bios are there. What you're going to find is ex-CIA, ex-British SAS, ex-Secret Service, ex-military, all of those kinds of people that come from either law enforcement or a military special forces type background or intelligence agencies. There's a reason for that. The beauty of hiring people like that is the one thing governments do really well is they train people extremely well because they spend millions of dollars training these people for these different military, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies. And that's across the world. Corporate America can't do that. So if I can inherit someone who has literally lived that life, that's been formally trained for 20 to 30 years, and this is really the most important part, Michael, thinks globally. They're global citizens. What I can't have in my world, and I try and hold myself to this standard, you cannot have a US-centric mindset for the world. I lived abroad most of my adult life. I do not think like an average American or an average European. The Europeans are better at it, frankly. They have a much more worldly look out. Americans, the dumb American analogy, it's real. Most Americans just don't understand the rest of the world because they go on vacation, that's their exposure. They don't get it. I think if you've lived abroad, you're formally trained to think globally, not think locally ever, and you don't immerse yourself in the local politics, the national politics of the United States, which I really do my absolute best to do. I think that's the profile we're looking for, because to answer your question, I want to look at the world as it is. I don't want a political lens. I don't want right, left, I don't want any of those tags. I want to understand the difference between the Philippines is not like Japan, and Japan's not like Colombia, and Colombia is not like Saudi Arabia. You have to localize the region, the country, the religion, the culture, the language. Those things matter more than anything else. And if you can't frame it within that very tight window of the reality on the ground, and you think like a Western American, you'll fail. So this is really, really important to us. It doesn't mean I'm not, I'm an American. I claim that. Nationalism matters to me, right? I wouldn't have served and fought for the country and gone to war. That being said, I don't believe in, certain parts of American politics. I think they're bad for the country. I think they're bad for the world. I want to view the world for what it is and then operate within that context and really value language and culture. Those things matter, especially in these situations.
So that sounds like what you do when things go right, but all the same, occasionally things must go wrong. When that happens, how do you deal with mistakes?
Yeah, so look, we're gonna have I had a tech client that we put 50 people on a bus 2 nights ago near Odessa, in the southwest corner. We were taking them to Romania. We got to the border. We warned them and said, look, the government standard is 18 to 60 years old. They cannot leave the country. We said when they first announced this, it was not being enforced in the first 2 days. We said, we're now day 3, day 4. You risk taking 18 to 60-year-old men to the border. They might not get across, but you can take the risk. We got to the border and 18 of 50 did not cross. And they were upset and they blamed us and said, Dale, we thought they were going to get across. And we said, no. We warned you the conditions were changing. Anything can go wrong. They're now enforcing the standard. What we did not do is we kept our buses there. We got them back in the bus. We returned them to Odessa, put them in a safe zone and said, look, we can move them within Ukraine to a safer zone. That's an option. Or some of them will volunteer and go join the government and so on and so forth. So you're going to have clients that don't understand that. You're going to have clients where we say, look, we can get to the border in 10 hours. We think it's probably another 10 to 15 hours to cross. Next thing you know, it takes them 2 full days to cross. They get upset and go, we thought we'd be done in 20 hours and it's been almost 40. The reality is It's war. It's uncertain. These things happen. And again, they just don't understand it. Why should they? They're not used to operating this. They haven't been exposed. We understand that. We simply have to say very calmly and reiterate, it's uncertain and these things happen. It's war. It's hell. It's going to happen. Bad things happen in war. It's completely unpredictable. There's no way to control all of those elements in a war zone.
Last question. Can you talk through me how you balance preparation versus adaptation?
Yeah, so what you're going to find is, again, we're working that 48 cycle. Before the crisis even hit, and we'd be happy to share this with you, we sent all of our large corporate clients a briefing 31 days before the Russians invaded. We framed it and said, here's what we think is most probable, most likely, most dangerous. And I literally remember sending an email to one of the largest banks in the world and who has a large population there. This is us sounding the alarm. We had given them the brief 31 days out. 2 weeks had passed. You could see what was coming. It was changing. The Russians were getting momentum and they hadn't moved their expats yet. And we were 2 weeks out and we said, listen, we think you're in the last window to get them out easily. They listened, they got them out. So that preparatory phase really matters. For the ones that didn't do that, now as I said this earlier, it pays to be the first mover, meaning we wanted to move fast, get expats out of Kiev, out of Dnipro, out of Odessa, move them in the first 3 days. Because after 3 days, the roads start getting crowded, the borders start getting crowded, and all the assets are under duress. So that planning, that prep, the monitoring, the advice, and then having the speed to move early, be a first mover, all that's part of the preparation, if you will. Now, Michael, transition. We're going on a week into this. Everything's reactive now. What I could do 2 days ago, 4 days ago, 5 days ago, I might not be able to do today. I can't get into Kiev. I might not be able to get into Dnipro tomorrow. Odessa, right now, watch Odessa in the southwest. In the next 72 hours, Odessa might get locked down. The Russians are moving out of Crimea to the west, northwest. They might start putting pressure on Odessa. And we might not be able, right now I'm operating with complete freedom of maneuver. That might change in 48, 72 hours, maybe a few more days, but it's very likely that's going to happen. So my point is, in the first, call it month, we were prepping. Then we hit a phase with the invasion. Then we responded as fast as we could to be first movers. Now we're reactive. And we have to adjust and ebb and flow and constantly adjust to changing conditions. So to my point, the way we do that now, we're in this 48-hour cycle. Get a requirement, plan it, prep it, communicate it, go. And just continuously be 2 days out, 48 hours in advance. And guess what? There'll be missions that get canceled because we can't get in. We get a requirement today, we plan for it, we think we can execute. 2 days from now, we might not be able to get in. That's war. That's a crisis zone. That's the way this works.
Mr. Buckner, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it.